Hey, I've got a friend of mine who he and his wife own a Chinese restaurant. And after a long day at work, the couple comes home, they get in bed, and the husband says to the wife, "Hey, how'd you like to do try 69?" And she looks at him quizzically and says, "Isn't it kind of late for Szechuan beef with vegetables?" Five, four, three. CGP Video Pictures presents Trek Tonight, Season 2. This week, Strange New Worlds. With your hosts, Christopher Pitcher, Leo Byrne-Janicek, and Keith Jacobson. Tonight's review, The Broken Circle. Now live from New York City, Wilmington, Delaware, and Everett, Washington, it's Trek Tonight. Hey there, Trekkers, and welcome to the beginning of our series on Strange New Worlds. We have eagerly been waiting for this, and it occurred to me that this is where we started. Right, Leo?
It is.
Yeah, we started with Strange New Worlds, and nearly 70 episodes later, here we are doing Strange New Worlds again. Hey, I wanted to take a moment just to announce, it was in the description of tonight's episode, but we are thrilled to have Keith Jacobson join us as a regular member of the cast here at Trek Tonight. So welcome, Keith.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm not sure why you want me. There's no accounting for taste, but here I am.
Hey, Angela's here. She says, "Woohoo!"
Angela, woo!
Anyway, we talked briefly about how we wanted to dive into this, and so this first episode, Broken Circle, it was sort of an unusual season premiere.
It was
because first of all, we only had a few minutes of our lead character before Pike goes off to try to find a attorney to help Una, and then Spock basically takes the center stage. And is, the focus of the episode pretty much. So it was very interesting. I don't know, first general impressions or thoughts. Keith, why don't you lead us off since you're officially a member of the crew now?
I thought it was fantastic. I hope they never have a bad episode because so far they're batting pretty high. I hear all you're saying about Pike not being in the center, but I loved what we got there. I loved the focus on Spock and M'Benga and Chapel. I enjoyed the plot that we had going on in it, and I enjoyed the character moments that we got in the show. All in all, I think this was a very solid episode, and I don't know if it's unusual or not, but I thought it was certainly a great start. I'm looking forward to seeing more.
Yeah, how about you, Leo?
it is an unusual move to sideline your top billed character, but I think we'd all predicted, or at least I predicted, that the first episode would be Una's trial. But since she can't find representation, and this one lawyer somewhere across the quadrant is I guess the best person to, the best legal mind in this particular field, and she won't even take her calls. So Pike's like, "I'm going to go do that. Spock, mind the shop. You'll be fine."
Right.
And you can tell Spock is anxious, and he actually goes to talk to M'Benga about it. He says, "Well, if you're a human, I would say it's stress." And you find out he is stressed because he'd released all these emotions that he'd had under control to fight the Gorn towards the end of the season.
Yeah, he took down the blockers.
The blockers.
Yeah.
And now
yeah.
he that those emotions keep sort of leaking out, and he feels that it'll compromise his ability to command the ship, even though, as Pike says, listen, you'll be fine. You'll never even leave space dock, which...
Yeah. I love how he
said,
said famous last words.
Yes, as
Right.
you humans are fond of saying, famous last words.
Yeah. Hey, but before you go on, Craig jumped in congratulating Keith on being a member of the crew.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yep.
Thank
Mike
you, Craig.
Robbins says, howdy, y'all.
Hey, Michael.
I thought you were up in Washington, not down south. But and let's see. Craig says he wants some green adrenaline injections. Better than
Damn, that looks like good shit.
It does, although I have to imagine that normally you would have a huge crash down after all that energy. And
well, but let's think about this. Was it simply an adrenaline injection, or was it a performance enhancer?
Something like that. But even so, like something like that takes a toll on your body. If it like hypes everything up, your body's gonna be like, you gotta sleep now. Of course, they spoilers for the rest of the episode. Why you'd be listening to us not having seen the episode is
right.
I mean, I'll chalk it up to our charming personalities, and devilish good looks. But maybe being frozen because they had to jump into space, they had to airlock themselves. Yep, spoiler alert.
And
that
by
made them need to, we never got to see the crash because they were just recovering from all the trauma. So
right.
Which I think this is not the theory I've been talking about, but this is another theory that I'm having. What if these green performance enhancing drug is the reason Mbenga's not the chief medical officer on the Enterprise by the time we get to McCoy? Yeah, down the road.
Maybe.
It's a good question. I don't, I'll worry about that when they get to it.
Sure.
Well, and then the other question is, was this something that Starfleet issued to give them
I don't know.
an advantage, or to get them up to the level of the Klingons during the war, or was this his own blend?
It's a good question.
And if it was his own blend, then I could see that would fall into Keith's theory.
Maybe. Again, these are questions to be answered, but I'm along for the ride.
I am too.
Yeah,
I am too.
But it's right now. We also we have the introduction. That's not really a word. Introduction of Commander Pelia, as played by Carol Kane, as the new chief engineer. Both Keith and I found her delightful.
Who's looking very good for 70 years old.
Yeah, she is. She's a delight. I've loved her in everything I've seen her do. Chris, you're not nearly as fond of our new engineer.
I'm gonna have to warm up to her, I think. I'm afraid.
Okay.
So far, it's a little bit. Performance is a little bit over the top, goofy, kitschy, and there's not a lot of substance to the character yet, from my perspective. Just as a director looking at it, I would have liked to have seen a little more substance to it and a little less, Princess Bride goofiness.
Wacky grandma.
Yeah, wacky grandma stuff. But that's just me. That's just me,
So, should I drop my theory now, or should we wait till later? Because it actually ties in together a couple of things that were said later on in the show. Okay, so here we go. We learn that so stay with me if you will. Consider these facts for a moment. We've got an alien species with a strange accent, vaguely Eastern European, maybe. Hard to tell exactly what it is. Uhura recognizes it as a Xanthite, I believe was the phrase.
Atlantean.
Atlantean, that's it, an Atlantean. And apparently, as we find out later in the show, Atlanteans have been on Earth for centuries, living amongst humans without them knowing. Does that mean? Because if we consider the historical documents, say from the early 1980s, there was a person who looks looks very much like a younger version of our engineer, who happened to have dated then married a mechanic with also a strange, weird accent, vaguely European, Eastern European, we don't know, who married a mechanic in a taxi garage. This woman, by the way, went by the name of Simca. What if Simca and Pelia are the same person, which means Taxi, the TV show Taxi, is part of the Star Trek universe?
That was a lot. You took the scenic route back from the airport there.
Yeah.
I did.
That is an interesting theory, and I'm sure right now at least one of those people who thinks the same as you is diligently setting up their fan fiction.
Well, it probably no, and it also ties in because clearly Reverend Jim becomes a Klingon somehow.
Yeah.
Sure, but I'm thinking Latka was also a Lanthian, just not quite as well adapted as Simca.
Yeah. Well, we know that they're effectively immortal, as she describes it.
Right.
And I don't know whether that means they regenerate or if they, if somebody shot one with a phaser or even a 20th century firearm, whether they would die like anybody else. But that is unclear. They just may be super long-lived and maybe enjoy, health well into their advanced years.
Yeah, Cliff Diamond says Louis was an alien for sure.
Sure.
And Keith Jacobson wins the Taxi Star Trek Tie-In Award for the entire decade.
There have been no other entries into that category, but you're still winning.
I'll take whatever wins I can get.
Hey, listen, if we're gonna have crossovers now, why not?
I'm just waiting to hear if at some point in this show, in the next 9 episodes, she refers to the fact that at one point she was married to a mechanic in a taxi garage.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
We will.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I've got one for you. I've got a deep cut. I've got a little deep cut for you that I stumbled across the other day. What's his name? Green.
Lorne Green?
No. The character.
Colonel Green?
Colonel Green.
Yes.
Colonel Green's uniform was reused for Mork's uniform with just the triangle stuck on the front of it.
Yes.
Did you know that?
I did.
Okay. That was news to me. I didn't realize that. I just discovered that.
It is a deep cut.
Yeah.
It's amazing that costume lasted as long as it did.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, somebody had it in a bag. Hey, John Van Gosteen is here. Says the D7 battle cruiser was great to see. I agree with you there. I totally agree, John. That was awesome. Okay, now Craig Lubin says, until Keith said that, I did not know that I wanted to see it. Oh, man. We're going down a rabbit hole, guys.
Right after Legacy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right after Legacy. Yeah.
Although
Until
missing 2 key cast members, of course.
Yeah.
Until I am disabused of that knowledge officially, that is my headcanon.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Very good. So what were some of the things that you guys particularly liked about the episode? Were there? We've talked a bit about M'Benga and Chapel. You know, they had clearly. Did we do this in the green room or on the show?
I think we did.
They clearly had a past. They obviously served together during the war. Yeah. Okay. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought it was an interesting side to M'Benga we haven't seen yet.
It is.
I think so too.
He has a lot of rage, but also there's in the very beginning of the episode, there's a little Easter. Not really an Easter egg, is a Easter basket. It's fairly is that because Spock is feeling all the stress. Is that maybe if you're trained in music, all Vulcans are. He's like, well, yes.
Yeah.
And he gives him the Vulcan harp, the one we remember from the original series, and he starts playing it, and of course, like all his heart rate and everything comes down until Nurse Chapel walks in, and suddenly he's like,
It's right back up again. Yeah.
And
Cliff says he's glad to see Klingons looking like Klingons. Well, that's true.
This is the first time Spock has stolen the Enterprise, but not the last.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Actually, he doesn't steal it. He's not there.
He didn't know in the cage.
In the menagerie.
Oh, right, in the cage. Yes. Okay. Yes. Right.
Because he does to bring Pike back to Telosians.
Yes.
So a precedent was set, and it is remarkable that he rather than being purely logical, he's like, well, La'an says that there's trouble, so I believe, and she's my shipmate, so I believe her. And Robert April is like, yeah, no, you're not going,
right?
Because in a very cold war sort of East Berlin, West Berlin kind of situation.
Oh yeah.
There's this planet right on the border of Klingon space and Federation space, and it's like a rich dilithium content on the planet. So every 3 months, a different power comes in and sort of runs the show. And the Klingons are there now. So, the Admiral says, don't go there. You could start a war, but he decides to do it anyway. And they had to try to fake a warp core breach. And Pelia sees right through them. She's like, first, if you're going to steal a starship, you should do it right. And she tells them what to do. And she comes along with them. She's, she's the inspector, make sure, because they're in dry dock. We also got to see one of those cool, smaller one-engine starships like we saw in the Bourne episode, and also I think in the pilot. And you could see sort of the scale difference between it and the Enterprise.
Yeah.
So
hey, speaking of the D7, Craig says the D7 warp nacelle lock and load sequence was cool.
It was like in the old show, they used to fire at the ends of those little flat narcels on their ship, but now it sort of like unfolds, and it's like the bottom part is not an engine, but also a cannon of some kind. Photon torpedoes or disruptor.
And hey, Barbara Pitcher is here, and she says she loved the look of the musical instrument. So yeah,
it is a classic.
It is a classic. Yeah.
So they go, against orders, but they get rid of most of the people on the ship. So not they're not going to compromise other people's careers, but they decide they have to go. And it was, and Spock has in a fairly serious episode, Spock has sort of this little light moment where they're like Ortega's and Mitchell and Uhura are like, so what's your thing? What are you going to say? Like when you go to war, Mitchell said, my old captain just used to go zoom. And which I thought was delightful. And so he's like, I want the ship to go now. No, I want the ship to go. And he goes, now. And it is perfectly on brand for Spock to come up with like the most sort of utilitarian, bit of panache. So I love that moment. I always like seeing the crew sort of teasing each other, but in a way that obviously comes from deep affection. So
sure.
Yeah, the relationship of everybody in this show, of all of the characters in this show, is fantastic. I really enjoy seeing the camaraderie that they all have.
And it was cool. I liked how they tied Lyanne back into the show. And it was interesting that she sort of fumbles across this. She goes to that planet you were talking about and fumbles across the idea that she thinks that there actually is a plot being hatched to try to get the war back on between the
Right.
Klingons and the, but this time for profit,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
this planet would be very profitable for whoever controlled it, and the war would drive the need for dilithium.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was cool. And then
It
of
was.
course
I
they,
like them all in their sort of, backwater sort of,
yeah,
Mad
here's,
Max
Mm.
meets
yeah.
the Matrix look.
Look, I
They're all-
know. Look at Mabenga's coat, man.
It's
That's a
very
cool
cool.
code.
That is something, right?
I have to say,
And
a lot
then,
of sci-fi
and then,
series, like their coat game or their jacket game, is on point.
oh, totally,
Um,
yeah, yeah. They've clearly got somebody who's really into jackets and coats,
yeah.
because
But by the way,
it's
the outfit that Anne wore is the same one that Mirror Giorgio wore when she was like sort of incognito on our side.
Oh,
So-
neat.
oh, cool,
Neat.
yeah. So yeah, so they go there. Mabenga and Chapel sort of get drafted into working in the medical tent because they find out that what kind of was it? Radiation off of photon torpedoes
Yes.
That's what it
was
turned out. Yeah, there was
poisoning people. Yeah, it was poisoning people, and the little girl that Leon was trying to connect with her parents ended up getting exposed to this, and they were very sick. So they were there trying to take care of that, and then they sort of get drafted by the Klingons, who dragged them off to other things. I've got some comments coming in here. Oh, yeah, Angela mentioned Vamonos.
Vamonos.
Yes.
Yes, that was
Yeah,
Ortega's.
was
She
Ortega's
was
thing.
workshopping Vamonos.
Yeah, and as Cliff says, so what was Kirk's catchphrase? He didn't have one because that started with Next Generation.
That started with Picard. Yeah.
Yeah, it started with Picard.
Sorry.
I
Yeah,
was
when
actually
they said
kind of
prophets, I thought of Ferengis. Yeah,
that crossed my mind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know when the first. Well, I guess they met them before the events of Next Generation because they were aware
Right.
of them. But
yeah. I just
anyway,
don't know when the Ferengis appeared in the timeline.
like a
Maybe
lot
somebody
of
out
Star
there
Trek
knows
canon,
that.
it's
I
a
don't
little
know when.
flexible.
Yeah, I don't know when they appeared in the timeline, but yeah,
I'm sure somebody's written a book outlining that.
I'm
But,
sure they
you know,
have. I'm
Anyway,
sure they have.
but I love the
I'm
whole
willing to
book.
bet one of my game books here has it. Has
Yeah.
it somewhere.
It might. It might.
I do love Lan. Like when we first see her, she's in a blood wine drinking contest with this Klingon.
Yeah.
What she beats him because apparently he's throwing up. He's like, whoa, like he's like,
Yeah. Maybe think of
and-
Indiana Jones and the.
yeah, very Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they find out she's selling Federation phasers to these Klingons, and they get an argument. Well, that's half of what or I'll give you a third. And she says you'll pay twice, and she puts out some gizmo, and she presses a light goes on, and you hear that, zzz, that, and she says a photonic energy release, and it says, basically says you'll pay what I'm asking for, and he's like, he says, are you sure there's no Klingon blood in you? Which was a great little line read for that guy.
Yeah.
And find out that it's a little Leia is the bounty hunter in Jabba's palace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except she was completely, because
Faking
for her it's
it.
like, is that a thing? She's like, no, that's not a thing.
No, it's not a thing. Yeah. Yeah. So we're at the point with the Klingons. Let's talk a little bit about the Klingons. Cliff brings it up. I thought they did a really nice job with the Klingon makeup in this. It was enough of a callback to what classically we have come to think of Klingons. But there was a slight tweak to it here and there. Some of their heads were a little elongated, and it was interesting. But I liked it. I thought it looked good.
Yeah, I thought the Klingons were good.
Something I've read that the reason the Klingons were bald in the first series was that apparently they shaved their heads in war, which we didn't see later on. I mean, again, canon is flexible, and they like once the war was over, they're like, well, I guess I can grow my hair again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes as much sense as anything. In
Yeah.
There's sort of the weird world of Star Trek where things sometimes get changed because they do.
Right.
They definitely are the most altered species, I think, in the entire Star Trek.
They've had the most makeovers, yes.
Yeah, they've had the most refits.
Yes, refits.
But yeah, no, I thought they looked good, and I thought they acted like Klingons, and I thought it was great. Interesting plot that they uncover, which is that they're trying to do a false flag plot or trick in order to make it look as though the Federation has attacked the Klingons. Now, did they build that ship or did they steal it?
They built that ship.
I think they built it, but I think they may have taken parts that they recovered and put it together.
That's quite an undertaking.
Well, when you're serious about toppling governments,
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've got, again, apparently I'm the headcanon guy. My headcanon on that is that ship, all that ship needed to do was last long enough to get into orbit and engage a Klingon D7 in battle.
Right.
So it didn't even have to be fully complete in any way.
Yeah.
It just had to be
a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
Well, and you could see when Mabenga and Chapel are running around, they've got cables laying all over the place and conduits, and it's obviously they have the structure of a Federation ship, but then they sort of had to rig it in order to make it function. So
right.
Although it does beg the question, why was there any kind of, if that was the case and that's all they wanted it for, why was there any kind of an evac suit in there at all?
Well, I think those are just like junk parts that got left. I'm sure that maybe the ship crashed during the war. People ransacked, and sometimes they leave stuff there. Like, I can't get anything for that. I'm just going to leave it.
That's what I'm saying. I think that the ship was probably salvaged or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because
they even say it, when La'an, I think it's La'an, first sees the ship, somebody says, how did they get that ship down here? And La'an says, I think they built it.
Yeah.
So it's built in there. I'm willing to bet they basically use salvaged parts. It's a kit bash.
Right. Craig Lubin says, Keith Jacobson's theory rings true. It only took one shot from the Enterprise and the ship blew up.
Yep.
Well, it was just there to shoot at the Klingon D7, and it was a D7 we saw on the display. That was very cool.
Yes. I'm so happy that
all they had to report is a Federation ship attacks us, but we beat it handily. Obviously the Federation means to take over this planet. We should go to war. And it wasn't meant to be able to really go into battle, in any serious way. And that's a cool. I always like seeing some politics in Star Trek. Not like, I don't want it to be all politics, but I like the idea that it acknowledges, that they're individuals with different agendas. Because it was both humans and Klingons who were like, we can make so much money doing this, and which goes to my theory that they didn't have a completely post-scarcity society in the 23rd century, because lots of people talk about paychecks and selling stuff, and if it was really that egalitarian, those terms of phrases wouldn't even be used anymore because nobody would know what they, just like there are very few kids that'd be like, like, oh, I'm going to dial my because we used to literally have to use this thing on this dial on a spring,
I'm old enough. I used to use those kind of phones.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, so did I. So did I. Yep. I still have some in my house.
Anyway, rant over. But and the whole thing is they figure out that La'an and Chapel are on the ship, and they play around with the transponder, and it sends something in Morse code 2, which we've never heard of before.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like Enterprise destroy ship, and Spock is playing it very cool because he's in the center. He's got to make those calls, and they're like,
Right.
"Well, we could shoot them now," and they're like, "No, let's not do." Because he's hoping they'll be able to get off, or something will happen. And he finally has no choice. He orders the full photon spray. It blows up, and you can see in his face like how racked with like guilt and horror and shame and sadness he was in that moment.
Right.
Until they pick up the signal and they're able to bring them over, and he gives Nurse Chapel resuscitation. He's pumping the chest and doing the whole thing. I guess Mabenga can take care of himself because
I know Mabenga is kind of frozen.
Yeah, although he seems a little more aware, like she's unconscious. And she's like, she puts her hand on his face. She goes, "Why gotta be so rough?" Which was such a weirdly like sexual, like not weirdly. I mean, it's sort of
I know. Well, that's
like
her thing. I mean, she loves to challenge him that way.
Yeah. Plus, she's a little loopy, like she's coming out of this this trauma, but I thought it was an interesting moment.
Oh, I forgot to show this picture. Here's a still that I found of Mabenga with the Klingon. Yeah, and it does give you that that glimpse at what I was talking about. That the skull's a little bit elongated.
Yeah,
it's interesting. But anyway, so yeah,
it is. Of course, then they, I'm sort of spoiling the end, but they anyway. But they beam them back in. Obviously, they're not going to kill Benga and Chapel in the first episode, but they have to jump out of an airlock because they're Klingons pounding on the door, and he said, "Well, there's a tracer or a signal that will go off when we hit the vacuum," and she's like, "Well, we won't. It'll take us a minute to die, but we will pass out after 15 seconds." So, which I'm not sure is how much comfort that is. But they avoid certain death aboard the Klingon commandeered ship, and Spock, the captain of the Klingon D7 is like calling shenanigans on him, and
fair,
and Spock tries to pull the Vulcans cannot lie bit. And he says, "I don't believe in these sort of he doesn't say fairy tales, but something along the
myths.
Myths.
I think it was myths.
So I will only know a content of a man's heart when I, sit across from him at a table, look in his eyes." And he says, "Well, okay." Spock agrees, and he says, "Perhaps over a barrel of blood wine." And so, Klingon, you drink blood wine? I've been known to. And
which is that a lie?
There's a lot. There's a lot of, Spock is. This is an interesting stage for Spock because he's not fully the stoic we see for the most part through the original series. He's still wrestling with his emotions, and sometimes successfully, sometimes less so. But I do like seeing him, having these, working on himself and evolving. So
as my wife Jana made the observation, and I mentioned this to the guys in the green room, but it's almost like the Spock we're seeing. This is what she said. She said it's almost like adolescent Spock, and I thought that was an interesting observation because he clearly is evolving into the Spock that we see, much like a teenager evolves into being an adult. So it's interesting.
I'm curious. Again, there's a very Spock heavy episode. We also find out that Pelia, who will now be our chief engineer, probably not in every episode because she's in a twice Emmy winning and once Oscar nominated actress. So
Right.
I'm not sure they could afford to have her in every episode.
Right.
And she might have a schedule too. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of times when people they replace Kyle, they have a new transporter.
I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I don't know that I'm happy
he took
about
a job on the Vampire Diaries. So,
Oh,
which is probably, it's like go from like somebody who appears every other
Yeah.
episode, maybe, or
If
even if
that.
it's every episode, it's very brief, to being like, one of the leads or at least one of the supporting characters. I don't know what.
well, that
where he
brings
falls.
up this. Yeah, that brings up, since you said it, this sort of stock photo that I found of the cast basically for the season, and you see Kirk there, but you don't see Sam.
Sam Kirk. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, and I haven't seen Sam in any of the trailers or teaser stuff. So I wonder if he's
Well-
off the show.
Could you put that up for a second? Back up for
Sure.
a second.
Yeah.
So if we look at everybody at that panel,
Yep.
they either hold big roles on the ship, nurse, helm,
Right.
or they're a captain, or the chief engineer. We don't see any of the minor players, and I submit that even if Sam Kirk was in the show, he never played a prominent role in season 1, except in a couple of episodes.
Yeah, but to argue that, or to play devil's advocate with that, why is Kirk there?
Because he's Kirk.
Yeah. Well, see.
And also, you get to see Kirk and Spock on either ends of the table. It's very difficult when you have a
That's true. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Yeah, that's kind
a
of cool.
picture that oftentimes they position themselves like the Last Supper. I'm glad they did not do that here. Not in the exact way that they, sometimes it's overdone. But it's hard not to look at a bunch of people basically all sitting around on the same side of a table, the way you normally eat with your friends.
Right.
Right.
And it always evokes the Last Supper, at least for me visually. I don't know whether that's a deliberate choice, but yeah, I think we may see Sam Kirk again. I hope we do, because I liked his character.
Greg says Sam Kirk and James Kirk are the same person. Just for the mustache.
Like we believed Craig and his sister were the same person.
That's exactly right. I thought of that. Yeah.
How do you like them apples, Lubin?
Oh, it's good that we have friends, isn't it?
Yes.
For now, anyway.
Yeah, for now, anyway. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting. It was an interesting publicity shot, and I thought
I don't.
was cool to
I don't
look
think that publicity shot can tell us anything one way or another regarding Sam Kirk.
No.
all right. Yeah.
So
I just know that when you add that to the fact that we haven't seen him in anything to sneak out ahead of the show, and they did it last season. He was in the trailer last season. Just interesting. That's all.
Yeah, but he was barely in the last season anyway. They don't have the new transporter chief in here.
Because you think it's going to be Jim Kirk, but it's Sam Kirk. So
Right.
it was, it was a bit of the sort of the fake out.
The fake out.
I think Jim Kirk is going to feature prominently in one episode.
Right.
And that's because, he is, considered the captain's captain, so I think that's why he's in the picture, even if he is in only one episode.
Sure.
I mean, I could be wrong.
I know. I just threw it out there to open up a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Kirk, wherever you are, we're pulling for you, man.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we're pulling for you. We're pulling for you, just like Ensign Flight. So,
Oh, by the way,
now,
speaking of
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of that, Uhura's an ensign now.
Yes.
Yep.
Uhura has decided to stay on board Enterprise.
Yep.
So Hammer did fix Uhura.
Oh, there you
That
go.
was his. But this episode was dedicated to Nichelle Nichols.
I saw
They
that.
wrote-
Yes.
First through the door, showed us the stars, hailing frequencies forever open. So
Yes.
um,
There you go. That was very
lovely tribute to the late
Yep.
Nichelle Nichols. I guess we don't see a lot of. We haven't seen a lot of Pike so far, other than he's going to the mats for
Right.
for Una.
And I'm wondering, because they didn't mention the attorney by name, if it's going to be somebody we're going to recognize.
I don't think so. I won't tell you exactly what happened, but there is a. If you watch the Ready Room, they have a little sneak peek of next week, and it's a short bit with Pike regarding his quest.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
Craig wants to know if that you like the new engineer. Is she going to die?
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if I like her or not. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
I guess I already did. Damn.
Yeah.
well,
Hey, remember, Keith. You weren't that crazy about Shaw in the very first episode either.
Yeah, no, but I came to love the guy.
Right.
I came to love the
all
guy,
I'm
and
saying, and all I'm saying is, she hasn't done it for me yet. So
Right.
maybe she will.
it's
all I'm
because I'm sure there were a lot of fans who were like, when Shaw first showed up, and he was, let's call him salty,
Yeah.
and
Salty.
which he was.
He was.
But
yeah.
And we found out sort of the reasons for a lot of his choices, life
Yes.
choices, and you're
Yes.
like, oh, he's much more like becomes a sympathetic character. I'm hoping that Pelia will warm up. You'll warm up to Pelia because I enjoy her, and she is a little bit of the wacky grandma. She's got this all that we're like, oh, Spock is like, oh, you really a lanthanite? She's like, oh, a couple of drinks and you get all personal. Like, all right, slow down, flyboy. And she's just giving the business, which was fun. And we find out that the Lanthians apparently live thousands of years. And again, from what I can understand, they're effectively immortal. I think maybe barring, accidental.
At least they're not. At least they're not lizard men, who also have been living among us.
and
Different.
if
That's a
I
different
may-
crossover.
if I may, that flirty comment she said about couple of drinks and a couple of drinks, flyboy. If I may, that is exactly the kind of thing Simca would have said, with the exact same accent.
Well, he definitely is rocking. I'm trying to remember whether she actually. Her accent is normally not that pronounced,
Right.
But I like her. I think she'll bring a nice bit of sort of, chaotic energy in a good way to the crew.
Wow.
Because
you're right.
Una and Olan seems to be a little looser than she was last season.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't think she's going to be like, let's start a karaoke night.
Yeah.
But I think that she will be a nice sort of accent on the rest of them.
Yeah. I think that Leon warmed up a tiny bit once she went through Enterprise Bingo last season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she did, and I like her. The fact that she did this for this kid, and she's sort of beginning to become more vulnerable in a good way. Like
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what happens to her, like her sort of arc this season. I'm very excited to find out more about Ortegas, because like I've hidden from plenty of Klingons, and then the whole, like I did this 100 times during the war, whether she's cold starting the shuttle engine.
I've got to say, I think it's cool that they're utilizing the war as a recent event.
Yeah.
It's a nice backdrop to hang behind everything, because you were a little further away from it in TOS. Not a lot, but a little further away. So the idea that a lot of these main characters served during that war is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a nice background for some of them.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I
All
love
right.
the planet.
So let's talk about the very end.
Yes.
And I for a moment or two I thought, oh no, I hope April's not going to become a Badmiral. But I think it's more a question of, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. I think it's more of a question of, like you said earlier in the episode tonight, this is a Cold War kind of thing.
Yeah.
And clearly there are secrets being held at the top brass for security
Yeah.
purposes. But it does sound like April knows about a lot of things that are going on that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
As we find out, he said, well, because his Commodore, his adjutant, it's like, hey, you let Spock off pretty easy, because Spock basically said, unless I did it, I'll accept whatever punishment. And you find out, like, April shouting and says, might you lower your volume, possibly, Admiral. He's like, you hungover? He says,
Yeah.
negotiated a peace treaty over a barrel of blood wine. And he's just like, all right, consider the hangover your punishment.
Right.
And the guy was like, that's a little easy, don't you think? He says, well, he stopped us from having to fight a war on two fronts.
Right.
He says, and he's a good officer, and we're going to need good officers. And
Right.
they look at the screen, and there's this unidentified ship, and there's like possible Gorn attack ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was right near Cestus 3, which is, remember, which was previously the first encounter of the Gorn, when there's a Federation colony there that the Gorn were like, nope, that's ours. And proceeded to start killing anybody who's there. So.
Yeah, and I think, I also pretty sure we're going to see the planet, based on the trailer, the planet that was in the cage, or referred to in the cage, that they were fighting in the castle with the pike.
Rigel 7, was it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see that. There's, we picked out a lot of these little Easter eggs in the
we had fun that night going through.
That was fun.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like they're putting in just enough of the stuff that we know. They're like, oh, it's a little callback as a reference to this, but like the planet they were on was so cool looking. Like they had these sort of pillars of stone, and just the whole look of it was very cool. And it definitely looked alien. Like sometimes, sometimes it's like, well, there's some mountains, but they're purple or they're green, and you're like, okay, I mean, I guess that's different. But there's like that, you could be like on some weird thing with like, why is that mountain green? Is that are those trees? Until you get there, like, oh no, it's green rock. But it's
we've kind of gotten beyond, okay, spray paint the begonias purple and and stick them on there, But I have a question I want to throw out to Keith. So I know, Keith, you have talked before about battle sequences where the idea is, or the current idea is, throw a lot of ships in there, and that makes it dramatic and exciting.
Correct.
Did you find that initial sequence where they're flying up towards the space dock with the Enterprise sitting in it, undergoing its repairs, did you find that a little frenetic?
No, I thought it was the coolest.
8 million shuttles flying all over the place, and I thought to myself, this is really busy. Like busy to the point where, like, how do they not collide with each other?
Very good traffic control. I don't know. So
it made me think of you, because I was thinking about what you said. It
wasn't a battle. What we were doing right there is it's probably Starfleet's busiest base. So there's got to be all sorts of comings and goings and goings and comings, and
always too soon.
And always too soon.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it doesn't come at all, and people get embarrassed. We just don't know. But the point of the matter is, a busy star, and it's going to have stuff flying around it. And we did have an anchor visually in it. We actually had the star bases. We go swooping in. We get to see all of the ships that are docked at the star base, and finally we zoom on up to Enterprise.
Yeah.
If my problem with the big frenetic battles is it's hard to tell what's going on, and I think for a battle to work, you need to have some ship to focus on.
Right.
And without that, it just becomes visual noise.
Yeah. See, to me, that was a little bit of visual noise. There was just so much going on in that pan in towards where the Enterprise was, and I didn't recognize what those little. There were multiple versions of those little tiny ships.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Bees. I don't know what they were. They were interesting.
It seems like something that they would have flown in. Remember the Academy, like during Next Gen, they had the whatever Red Squadron or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, interesting.
Again, I think the whole point of the two kinds of shots is different. What we got in the opening sequence of this episode was essentially an establishing shot. It wasn't meant other than saying this is what it's like at Starfleet at Starbase 1.
Right.
That's it. That's all it was supposed to do. It wasn't trying to build tension for a dramatic moment. Right. It was just establishing this is what it's like.
Yeah, so basically Starbase 1 is a kindergarten with kids running around all over the place in different directions.
If that's how you interpret it, sure.
I mean, nobody crashed into each other. Unlike
no, they didn't.
They
didn't. You're right. You are right. And maybe that's just the fast-paced world of Starfleet.
Zip, zip, zip.
Yep. Who knows?
What we can't beat? Well, let's fly as fast as we can.
Yeah. Hey, Craig Lubin commented, this is going back a little bit because we got off on a couple of other topics towards the end here. But
what, us?
He said that chief engineer on Pike's Enterprise turns out to be like Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher from Harry Potter. They kick the bucket at the end of each season.
That's what I'm afeared of.
Well, I mean, she might leave the ship. I don't know if she'll necessarily have to die to leave the show.
Right.
She may do.
Well, it sounds to me like her. Yeah, it sounds to me like her motivation is she wants to get off planet, which she hasn't done in a very, very long time.
Which, by the way, that's as long as we've circled back to the engineer thing. Let's circle back to the engineer thing. One of the reasons why I think this goofy grandma works is because she's competent as fuck. I am not a big fan of the comic relief character, who has absolutely no role in the show other than just providing laughs. But she's like amongst all the engineers refitting Enterprise, she's the only one who goes, "Yeah, they're stealing the ship." So and while she says it all in a goofy, in a goofy, dare I say, Simca-esque kind of way, I'm gonna be beating this horse till this horse is good and dead.
Keith, and right there might be the reason that I don't care for her character. Because if she reminds you of Simca does not belong in Star Trek, in my opinion. So that's
why not? Why not? What happened?
I think there's room for every character.
We'll see.
What happened?
Simca, I remember being like a little sort of kind of oddball and not quite like with it, whereas Peli is extraordinarily competent. And
what happened to infinite diversity? What happened to infinite diversity, infinite combinations, sir? Why can't there be a competent goofball grandma in Star Trek?
There can be if she wasn't a flat actress.
Ooh. I might argue with you.
No, really, seriously, Keith. I don't think she's fully come into the role yet. And as we all know, it takes sometimes an actor a while, a couple episodes to come into the part. right now, my problem with her is not so much with the character. My problem with her is that I felt her performance was kind of two-dimensional. It was very, yuck, 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 yuck. And I didn't feel there was a lot of substance to her yet. So there may very well be yet. And I'm open-minded about it. I believe she might, come around. But that was just, for me, I felt she was a little flat.
Well,
ooh, I get a backup here. Barbara Pitcher says one-dimensional actor. Ouch. Whoa, very good.
You're undervisioned by one dimension.
My mom says she doesn't think she belongs there either. That's funny. Anyway, Angela loves her. So you know what? We're going to agree to disagree, as Angela said. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Again, like I say, there were some of us who didn't care for Shaw right away. I loved him the minute he opened his mouth.
Yeah.
So, it's all relative, right?
I predict she will grow on you, because while maybe in some ways she was played as one-dimensional, I'm not sure that's I'm not even certain I'm using the language right here, so forgive me. Yeah. But I think there are hints of depths at her. We know she's lived a very long time, even if we discount the whole Simca thing, which is hard for me. Which I
give it the old college try there, Keith.
Yeah. But we did talk about depth. She's got a motivation that is kind of different from just about every other character we've ever seen in Star Trek. She's bored. That is kind of new. Most people have motivations like Hemmer. I want to fix what is broken, which I loved it. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with Hemmer as a character was his motivation is my purpose is to fix what is broken. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah. And we have not seen anything. We have not seen a character in Star Trek like Pelia, who just is an adrenaline junkie, essentially. And not only that, but and if there have been adrenaline junkies, they have not had the same level of competence. And
I think this is again my opinion. I think that you are making assumptions about how her character is going to develop because you are a longtime Star Trek fan.
Maybe I am.
Okay, I can see where they're going with this. But in this particular episode, I didn't see anything except for the fact that she knew how to make them release the ship. There wasn't anything spectacular about what she was doing as an engineer. I'm sure we'll see it. I'm sure it will happen.
I mean, there was plenty of stuff going on. This was just sort of her introduction to it.
Right. Yeah, and again, like I say, a lot of times it takes people a few episodes to get their character out. And I certainly like Carol Kane. I mean, I always have liked her and things. So I'm sure she may very well have a chance to really develop the character. But just wasn't my favorite bit. There were other things I liked about it better.
Fair enough.
At any rate,
you're allowed to be wrong.
We have now battled our way to the end of the hour. I am really excited that we're back doing this.
Oh yeah.
I can't wait to see what we have next. I did go to look, Leo, for the Ready Room, and it hadn't dropped yet by the time I looked, but I guess it's up now. So I will go take a peek at that. And I did enjoy.
He interviews Carol Kane,
right?
And they do the little sort of trivia stuff and the bits they do, but it's.
I liked his sneak peek thing he did too.
I didn't get to see that.
It was kind of fun.
There's a lot of visually it was cool, that whole that sort of crystalline asteroid belt they were hanging out in, hiding from the Klingons. That was so cool. A lot of visually very, very strong episode, Craig says.
It's Quatloos, but yes, 5 Quatloos on Keith Jacobson from Craig Lubin. He wagers.
Yes.
Yes.
That's someone in my corner.
You will be now a part of Craig Lubin's herd.
And bear his color.
Oh man.
Yeah, there are worse people
Anyway.
there are worse people whose stables I could be part of.
Yeah,
That's
this
true.
is true.
That's very true. Any rate, guys, I'm very excited next week to see what we have coming up next.
Yes.
And I'm going to tease something that we're developing something, and I'm not going to say what it is, but Keith and Leo and I are all involved in it. And as the weeks unfold, we will talk more and more about it. But we are developing an interesting podcast effort. So we leave it at that. Before don't want to get too far into the weeds, but yes, we are working on a new project that will go along around the same time we do Trek Tonight. So that should be a lot of fun. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It was certainly fun sparring with you a little bit there, Keith, over poor what's her name from Taxi.
Hey, how can you go wrong to be in Carol Kane's corner?
That's right. There you go. Well, no, I mean, like I said, I love Carol Kane. I always have.
Yeah.
I always have. So, all right, gents, I'm going to roll us out of here. Listen, everybody, have a great week. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, brother.
We shall see you next week at 9 p.m. for the next episode. So, take care, everybody.